Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and with there being a pretty small build the last 2 weeks on Alpha, without really any Warlock changes at all, I'm not even going to talk about the one we got this week. I want to take some time today to talk about just sort of how Warlocks are, how they feel right now in Alpha. Now, for the most part, there's really only been one spec, being Affliction, that's gotten, I'd say, really any attention. Destruction and Demonology are mostly the same as they are on live, but at the same time, we don't have the Azerite, the Essences, the Corruption, or the overall, I guess, fluidity due to higher eye levels, higher secondary stats, things like that. So I want to talk today about how each spec feels, as well as some problems that, I guess, potential problems that I might see becoming a thing if things stay the way they are heading into Shadowlands. Quick shameless plug here. I do stream 5 to 6 days a week on Twitch. I'll place a link somewhere down here. All my week auras, profiles, add-ons are there available to you for free. If you want to swing by and grab them, feel free to drop a follow and hang out anytime on stream. So let's get right into this and start off with Affliction, the spec that's gotten the most changes so far. Okay, now, starting off with Affliction, I do want to mention here, before we get too far into the video talking about all the specs and things, that this is the very first, this is Alpha. There's only been a few builds that have had large, relevant content changes. We're still missing 3 zones, as well as the capital city. So, things will come over time. Certain classes have probably gotten most of their changes already, and some, like Warlocks, might not have gotten all theirs. I don't really know. But I have a feeling, talking about Affliction here in a minute, that we're going to see some changes. So, with that being said, let's talk about Affliction and the new Soul Shard spender that we have in Shadowlands, being Malefic Rapture. Now, at this current point in time, Malefic Rapture is our single target spender, as well as our AoE spender. And initially, I was hoping for something along the lines of having like an AoE spender, as well as a single target one. And they were separate. One was good in one scenario, obviously. One was better in another. But at the same time, maybe with there being like a priority mob in Mythic Plus, you were able to use Rapture as well as your single target ability to sort of deal even yet spread damage to multiple targets. Regardless, at this point, Rapture is the only Soul Shard spender we have, but that's not a bad thing. Unstable Affliction no longer costs a Soul Shard. And the interesting thing is that you can only have one Unstable Affliction active on any target. It doesn't matter if it's a 2-target fight or an 8,000 target fight. There's only one target allowed to be... you can only have UA on one target. It doesn't matter. Its limit is 1. So it's nowhere near as impactful damage-wise as it was before. Malefic Rapture, however, though, has really helped shore up Affliction's damage profile in Mythic Plus AoE scenarios, and it's also a pretty solid single-target damage-based event as well. We do still have the issue of, yes, we have to precast our Seed of Corruption, get our Agonies rolling. If you're going to get your Haunt and UA up, get it up, and then, cast your Vile Taint in some sequencing. And by the way, I did indeed mention Vile Taint there, because Vile Taint actually applies a dot to every single mob that it hits. It's like an AoE ground-placed effect. Phantom Singularity has been the go-to talent for mostly all of Legion into BFA, but it only puts 1 dot on one target and pulses on them. Yes, Vile Taint does indeed cost a shard, but it has a 20-second CD versus Singularity having a 45-second one. So, Vile Taint, in conjunction with Corruption's rolling, Agony is rolling, your UA, if you're rolling it on one target, gives you a lot more burst damage with Malefic Rapture. It might be a bit delayed, you can't recklessly go in and smash I-Beam, but it's still solid. And when you start casting your Raptures in Mythic Plus with multiple shards, your damage increases substantially. You can look at the damage meters. I've run a few dungeons on stream. You can see when you're casting Rapture, you start to jump on the meters because your damage is really strong once you get ramped up. It's nowhere near as... it's not as long of a ramp-up time as we've seen in BFA. Getting back to Unstable Affliction, though, like I said, it no longer stacks to 5, and that poses a few issues for us. Mainly being our Dark Lure cooldown is mostly built around having multiple dots active. If we're looking single target-wise on one target, or even in Mythic Plus, if we had time to set up, we'd roll Unstable Afflictions on multiple targets for the 10% bonus it gave to each target damage taken from us, and then pop our Dark Lair to extend all the dots to all targets and have a lot of I-Beam damage focused into one target, sort of harvesting resources from surrounding mobs in a sense. Unfortunately, that's not really a thing anymore. You can still do that with other dots, but UA is limited to one target. It still has a 10% damage amp on it, but it's nowhere near as big of a portion of our damage as it is currently on live. And honestly, it feels very, very similar to Haunt. Unstable Affliction deals its damage over time, but has that 10% modifier with it. Haunt deals its damage on impact, but also has that 10% modifier on it. And they're both dots you just want to maintain. They're both like the priority mob, whether it's multi-target or single target, set it and forget it kind of dots. Not super interactive. There's not really a whole lot. There's not really many ways to even play UA right now. As in, like, min-max. Play it, min-max it. It's just sort of in a weird spot. But, like I mentioned, most of our damage as Affliction comes in our Dark Lair window, which is every 3 minutes. And not being able to apply 5 Unstable Afflictions to your target, pop your Dark Lair, and then cast a Death Bolt is going to be a big, big, big hit to our damage. It's such a hit to our... It's such a huge change, not having UA be able to stack. I'm pretty sure... I have a feeling we're not going to see Dark Lair in its current form, maybe even at all, when Shadowlands releases. It's not that, like, it hurts Dark Lair's damage a bit. It hurts it a lot. It's almost like it has broken Dark Lair. It doesn't work anywhere near the way it does now. Dark Lair deals a baseline amount of damage through I-Beam, but it's increased for each additional dot you have on active in general, right? And yes, it might not be as impactful in, like, AoE scenarios because you can only juggle so many dots. In a single target scenario, being able to only stack, have active 1 UA versus 5 is big. And at the same time, Death Bolt, which, to be fair, most of you guys are probably going to be happy hearing this, Death Bolt's overall damage is hurt a lot too. Because let's be real here, most of our damage from Death Bolt came in our Dark Lair window, when we would extend our Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life, our 5 UAs, and our Singularity. We don't have that anymore. We have 1 UA extension. So it's really the limit 1 that UA has currently really has hurt Dark Lair overall as a CD, and it's already our weakest CD out of all 3 specs, as well as really, really hurt Death Bolt. So it just put us in a weird spot. I do like the way Rapture feels a lot in Plus, but even if, like, Rapture doesn't really even... It sort of works with Dark Lair, it just sort of doesn't, you know? They need to find some way to differentiate between Unstable Affliction and Haunt at this point, too. Because, like I mentioned, they just feel too similar to one another. They're both like... Because they've also increased Unstable Affliction's duration to 16 seconds from 8, which is modified by haste and things, but it's active for a long time. They need to find a way to separate, to differentiate between the two. There was an ability mentioned early on, right before the very first Shadowlands alpha build went live, when servers came up for it initially, that mentioned an ability called Soul Rack. Now, it's been changed a lot. There was a lot of different iterations mentioned, and eventually it was removed before the servers even came up. If there was some version of Soul Rack, or we had Soul Rack around in some form, or an ability maybe that increased the rate our dots tick on the target that's affected currently by UA, that would be really impactful, and also at the same time really help differentiate between Haunt and Unstable Affliction. So I'm just at this point not sure that Affliction's toolkit's done. I'm pretty sure for the most part it's just not done. I think we're going to end up seeing some more changes. The thing is, it's alpha. I think we're going to end up seeing a handful of them. I don't really know if it's going to be as much as moving talents around, new talents, or moving some, adding some back. I mean, for the most part, if Dark Lair stays in its current form, they've removed Death Bolt, which is probably good news for most of the community, because they hate Death Bolt. So it's probably between Nightfall and Drain Soul at this point. But outside of, like, the Dark Lair UA issues, for the most part, Rapture feels really good as Affliction. It does, like I said, help shore up the AoE Mythic Plus toolkit a bit. And in the end, like, yes, there are going to be times where Demon Hunters or whatever class goes in, smashes its cooldown, and the pack dies in 10 seconds. At the same time, that's just the way dungeons are designed. You know, long term, if you have the time to ramp up, you're going to deal with more damage with Rapture to a certain extent, right? There's going to be a threshold that leans one way or another, but as long as those mobs are alive for a certain period of time, which is shorter than it feels currently on live, you're going to deal a good bit of damage. I do think that if they try to keep Dark Lair in its current form, that it certainly needs to be brought down to a 2-minute CD. I think every CD, like Dark Lair and Infernal, need to be. But Dark Lair, regardless of, even with UA being the same as it is on live right now, or in alpha, Dark Lair is just not a very suiting CD for Affliction and Plus regardless. It never really has been. It takes so long to actually get your dots rolling. You know, on a let's say on a 5-mob pull. You have to precast your seed, get 5 agonies rolling, Haunt, Unstable Affliction, maybe multiples if we're talking live, your Singularity, and then you cast your Dark Lair. And it's not even like when you hit your Dark Lair, all the damage is dealt. All your damage is going to be coming in the next 10 seconds because your dots have been extended and your Dark Lair is dealing Eye Beam damage. And if you're playing Deathbolt, there you go. So, from a Mythic Plus perspective, Rapture, certainly, Malefic Rapture, certainly does help Affliction a lot. But I just think that, like, Dark Lair is still a hindrance. And it needs to be looked at for multiple reasons. Just the way it doesn't work very well with UA Deathbolt anymore, and just for how lacking it is in Mythic Plus compared to a lot of other CDs other classes have, which are also on a shorter cooldown. Okay, when it comes to destruction in Mythic Plus, it's not really received a lot of changes. For the most part, the only changes Destro and Demo in the same form have received are every spec now has baseline corruption, but Affliction has it instant cast still. Destro and Demonology have a 2-second cast on corruption. And all the specs have received curses as well, which are I'm going to get to in a little while here, but I'm not super excited about them when it comes to actual PvE. But regardless, destruction hasn't really changed a whole lot. The big thing that I've heard over the course of Alpha, or on stream, off stream, watching videos I put up, is that destruction looks really slow. It doesn't look very fun. It doesn't look very exciting. The damage looks bad. Well, first of all, there's no meters on Alpha, so you can't really tell. Destruction is very slow, though. But it's important to keep in mind, these are template characters. My 58 template character was lower eye level than my 50 character when I copied it over in the first few minutes of Alpha going live before they disabled character copy. So, yes, things are going to feel slow, but they always feel slow regardless getting to max level because your old gear is nowhere near as valuable, secondary stats are reduced, devalued, that's just the way it is. And yes, there also is, you know, a good portion of the community coming from playing Mythic Plus as Destro or Nilotha, where most of the fights are rolling Havoc Flashpoint based with Expedient, it's going to feel slow. But it's important to keep in mind that every single class is losing Azerite. Corruption, Essences, and a few other things along the way, mages with bracers and things, we're losing a lot. So a lot of classes are going to feel slow. With that being said, I don't think Destro was in a bad spot. And I'm saying that from a PvE rating perspective. Just because, and this is hard for me to say because like I enjoy playing Warlock, but it's true. Just because the spec doesn't get anything new or exciting, doesn't mean the spec's in a bad spot. And yes, like in the end, it'll all come down to numerical tuning, barring the toolkit being broken, as in like really good or really bad. But Destro is still set to be like the king of 2-target cleave. We still have Immolate our dot, Incinerate, Conflag, and Chaos Bolt, and Havoc. And you have like Rain of Fires and Cataclysms, depending what's going on with tuning there. But Destro's toolkit is still really strong. I mean, at this point, I don't think we're even casting Corruption in any spec. Well, Affliction, obviously, but Demo and Destro don't care about it if it has a cast time on it. For the most part, Destruction is in its current form. I don't think that's bad, though. I think Destro is still in a good spot when it comes to rating. When it comes to Mythic Plus, though, and this sort of does carry over a bit to rating, like I said, every class is losing Essences, Corruption, Azerite. We're losing our 2-minute Infernal build, and we're going back to a 3-minute Infernal. Now, that has a lot of implications. Yes, PvE, when it comes to rating, there's some there too. I think it hurts a lot more in Mythic Plus. Destruction and Demonology on live right now are very close to one another in Plus, or being like the best spec. They're both very close. Affliction is not good. Just don't watch well, you can watch my last video, but regardless, it was Affliction Freehold. Anyways, going back to a 3-minute CD for your Infernal is much more impactful and negatively impactful. It hurts much more than having a 1.5-minute CD on your Tyrant instead of 1 minute and 8 seconds. It's big. Destruction's damage outside of an Infernal is really, really low. And the thing is, I don't like the way this is for really any spec. The thing is, like, when you go into your Infernal, your damage is through the roof, and then it comes back down to the toilet afterwards. I really wish there was some kind of just generic damage increase to spells outside of your Infernal, because you have Supremacy, you have your Dark Soul, you have your CDs, if you're playing some kind of trinket or whatever, which you're holding for your Infernal. You deal so much damage within that Infernal Supremacy window, but then you do garbage for the next 2.5 minutes, or 1.5 if you have a 2-minute Infernal. The biggest change I would like to see currently for Destro, barring like talent swaps and things, that's a different video, different time, it's more in depth. I think it's really, really important for Blizzard to at least take into consideration giving us back a 2-minute Infernal, or giving us a 2-minute Infernal, I guess we should say. a 2-minute damage profile in Mythic Plus versus a 3-minute one is really, really big, especially the higher you go. You can have large CDs for every other pull for the most part, but a 3-minute CD is really odd and awkward. It makes decisions like, okay, I know the boss is going to be in about, 2 minutes here. Do I want to pop my Infernal now or no? I can pop it. Okay, well, if I pop it now, I'm not getting it into the middle of the boss fight. It just feels bad. I don't like having all of our damage, the majority of our damage on a 3-minute CD in a 30-second window doesn't feel good. I don't think it's very engaging gameplay. It's just not where you want to be when it comes to Mythic Plus. And it is impactful in rating as well for certain damage profiles, ad spawning, DPS checks you have to beat. It's just rough, So I mentioned Corruption a bit ago, and at this current point in time, it's cool seeing the nostalgic abilities coming back, sort of, like Corruption, and this is obviously opinion-based. Most of the Warlocks in the community hate Corruption and Curse coming back. It's whatever to me. Like, I don't understand why there's a cast time on it. I sort of do. Here's the thing. I'm not going to be spending 8 seconds applying Corruption to 4 mobs in Mythic Plus when a Demon Hunter can go in and randomly just blast an I-Beam, or I can go in and drop a Cataclysm to apply 4 or 5 Immolates at one time. Even with Corruption's cast time being reduced by haste, I'm not going to spend 5 seconds casting 4 or 5 Corruptions unless the damage is tuned way through the roof. At this current point, it's not. So, if they want to have certain abilities coming back, just for the iconic nostalgia kind of feel, that's cool. But I feel like, for locks, for the most part, the abilities we've gotten back are sort of irrelevant. The curses are cool, and we're going to use them. But the thing is, you're going to go in and put Recklessness on the boss. And the second Warlock is going to put up Weakness, unless the boss doesn't hit hard at all. And then you can put up Curse of Doom. But guess what? Curse of Doom's damage is not even very good right now. And that you're never going to spawn a Doom Guard. And even if you do, they fix it or change it, you still have to enslave it, and then it replaces your current pet. And if you have improved Curse of Doom with Demonology, which I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, it still replaces your main pet. Like, I get the nostalgia factor. It's cool. I like them personally, but I just don't think, like, application-wise, they're going to be very relevant. You're going to put up a curse, and you're going to forget it. And that's compared to Shamans getting Wind Fury back or other classes getting pretty nostalgic but relevant abilities being a big part of the toolkit, doesn't really feel very good. But at the same time, I'm just not sure if Destro, Demo, and or AF tuning are really even done at this point. We very well could see some more changes for Destro, for Demo, and for AF. Now, obviously, I saved the best for last. Last but not least, we have Demonology. Once again, it's in a very similar spot to Destruction in Alpha right now. Not a whole lot has really changed with Demonology. We have baseline Corruption, and we have baseline Curses. Besides that, it is pretty much the same damage profile, the same rotation, the same abilities, barring talents changing and buffs, nerfs, that we have on live right now. It feels slower. It certainly does. But like I mentioned for Destruction, every single class, every single spec feels slower right now. It does, because they're template characters. I have 5% haste on my level 50 template character. I have like 35 on my Warlock on live. And yes, that 35 will go down to much less when we level more and more. But I mean, they're template characters, so not actual characters we're copying over. When we're 60, we'll be slow again for a little while until we get into dungeons and raiding. And that's just how expansion's going WoW. It's unfortunate, and it sort of feels like your character is weak and loses, a lot of his power, but that's just the way the game is. If you were able to maintain 35% haste over multiple expansions, how would you even feel like you were gaining power? So I think it's important to keep that in mind. The toolkit feels the same for the most part. We still have Implosion, Demonic Strength, Bombers, Fellstorm, Demonic Tyrant, if you're playing Consumption or not. There were some changes made to Implosion. Now, it's not target capped. I believe this similar changes were made to I-Beam, I think. It deals less damage to surrounding targets, Implosion does, which is really odd because, yes, we do implode single target-wise now on live, but that's because of explosive potential being really strong. I do get the fact that maybe they're trying to bring Implosion and Demo's AoE maybe more in line with what they're trying to do with target capping and things, but it's just sort of odd. I don't totally get it. I think there's probably better ways to go about that if we're trying to do that, like just not have target capping, but I mean, that's another debate in itself, and there's a lot of strong points they've brought up for reasons as to why they want target capping. But regardless, the biggest thing for Demonology at this point is that we don't have an interrupt. And I've talked about this entire expansion, all of BFA. We don't have an interrupt. And it's not that, you know, I know someone's going to leave a comment down below saying, oh, we have a Fel Hunter. Oh, we do. But the Felguard baseline deals more damage for Demonology. It's also tied into Demonic Strength, as well as Soul Strike, and brings baseline Felstorm outside of us as well. Like, we don't. If the Fel Hunter dealt the same amount of damage as the Felguard and the Felguard didn't have abilities tied into our talents, our raw talents. I'm not talking Azerite traits or essences. They're raw class talents, and 2 of them are normally what we take. That would be different, but it's not. You know, Demonology does not have an interrupt without substantially weakening its DPS overall in Mythic Plus. So I don't think that the argument we have a Fel Hunter holds water. Yes, at times you can swap like on a boss or 2, but you want that relevant interrupt for Plus. You even want it in rating at times too, you know? I mean, look at Dark Inquisitor, this tier. You know, I played Demonology on it for a few weeks now because we're on farm. And I'm not in the interpretation regardless, but even if I'm not, it would be nice to have a backup if somebody's, you know, if something happens, right? It just feels bad. Demonology is the only DPS spec in the game without an interrupt. Some healers have interrupts. Like, it feels bad. It sort of reminds me, I'm not trying to make this a big complaining video because we'll get into more things here obviously, but there's a few simple solutions I feel. You can just straight up give us Grimoire Fel Hunter from PvP. Whenever you cast it, it interrupts your target. At the same time, you know, maybe there's even some leverage or some play to that where it deals a bit of baseline damage when you cast it. So if you don't need an interrupt, then hey, it's a bit of an extra damage boost. There's a lot of ways you can tie in an interrupt to Demonology to make it flavorful, but for the most part, I think Demonology on live right now is damage-wise probably the 3rd best spec in Mythic Plus for range DPS. Don't get ahead of yourselves here. You still got all the melee ahead of every other range, but real talk, like it's Fire Mage, BM Hunter, I think Demolock. I really do, and that's not even like it's not really a bias there. Like Demonology's damage profile is really strong. A huge minute CD on like your Tyrant as well as consumption being a thing, Demonic Strength, Implosion for baseline AoE damage. It's really powerful. It's really strong, but we don't have the utility because Demonic Circle or Demonic Gateway is not utility. You know, you can typically Shroud in the same similar fashion to whatever Demonic Gateway gives you. Obelisk and Awakened Obelisk are a thing now for skips as well. And people will say Healthstones in the comments, and there is some utility there. But Healthstone's only relevant past the first 3, because every single person can make a Warlock and park it outside the dungeon and get Healthstones for the entire group before you start the run. So yes, there is some utility there, but it's later on. It's after those first 3 Healthstones are used. And outside of that, we don't have any form of CC. Fear is not a reliable form of CC because it'll run other packs and pull things. Banish is a very good form of CC. Very good, but it's very limited to what targets you can hit. You can stop like bolstering on some of the elementals in Motherlode, some of like the Thorn Guards in Waycrest. But for the most part, you're really limited as to what you can banish versus a mage. You can go to Sheep, Shaman, Hex, Hunter, Trap, whatever, you know. But the biggest thing is no interrupt. For the most part, you can probably work around forms of CC, but no interrupt just kills Demonology. Like, I don't think you'll really ever see it played in any like high-end scenario unless it's in a form where it was in 8.2, I think. No, in 8.1 in BOD, when EP was buffed so much through the roof, our damage was so good it didn't matter. We played Demonology single target on AoE fights, on cleave fights, spread cleave, Conclave of the Chosen, because it was that good. Regardless, the biggest thing from Demonology from Shadowlands Alpha, I'd like to see an interrupt. The damage profile is still there. It's pretty much the same. And Demonology is also pretty similar to how Demon Hunters are on Alpha right now. It's a relatively new spec, so there's not a whole lot of abilities they can probably pull from that they can return, like iconic abilities to this form of Demonology. What do you want, like Demon Wrath, like Thalkael's Ascendance, Consumption? Like, it's not really, you know, an easy thing to do. If there was one other change, I've said it a few times on stream, Baleful Invocation, as far as an Azerite trait goes, losing that Azerite trait hurts a lot. As far as like Destro goes, yeah, Destro, Rolling Heavy, Flashpoint, they're pretty important traits when it comes to cleave fights. But if you're not on cleave fights, if you're playing single target Destro, which I don't really know why you are, but if you are, they're not like, it's not like it's a required trait across the board. And the same for Affliction. Yeah, Cascading's really good, and Racking's good, and ID's good, but there's no like pretty much mandatory trait for those 2 specs. Baleful Invocation is the closest thing you get to a mandatory trait for any spec for Warlock. So as far as all 3 specs go, Demonology losing Baleful Invocation is, I feel, probably going to hurt the most. Yes, you can make a case for Destro rolling Havoc Flashpoint, but that's just is what it is. Destro's still really good at 2-target cleave. The more I've played with Demonology on Alpha, the less I've gotten used to not having those 5 shards after casting my Tyrant. I've still tried to go right into a hand of Gul'dan a million times, but you'll get used to it. It doesn't feel very smooth. It sort of feels a little slow. Slow is not a good word because most every spec feels slow in Alpha right now. It feels... I don't like using the word clunky because clunky is not very descriptive, but it just feels a bit off, I guess. A lot of it's breaking the habit from live. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some form of Baleful Invocation on a Legendary. Just being real. I think if they're not going to work Baleful into like a talent, any kind of talent tree or baseline Tyrant, which I don't think they will, I think Baleful Invocation could very easily be seen on a Legendary for Demonology and still bring that BFA Demonology feel in the end. But I don't think Demo's in a bad spot. Destro and Demo, for the most part, pretty much the same way they are on live. You know, Aft's gotten the most changes, but it's just the way it is. I don't think Warlocks are done, though. We're going to end up seeing changes, I imagine, probably to all 3 specs. Affliction in its current form feels good. I like Rapture a lot. It's a lot of fun. But Dark Lair just... it feels like a CD that was made for a different version of the spec. It doesn't fit this current form of Affliction with Rapture. Really, I don't think at all. And the same with Deathbolt. You know, so Destro and Demo might see some changes. If I sort of have this odd feeling that Blizzard's trying to, like, with the addition of Rapture, this expansion, they're trying to push Demo to be our single target spec, Destro to be our 2-target spec, and Aft to be our council/cleave base spec. And I could be way off here. But I mean, for the most part, Demo already has a good single target toolkit. Destro already has a really good 2-target one. And Affliction, the Rapture changes sort of make you feel like that's a council, like, cleave-based ability. It does a lot of damage single target. It's still a good filler, a good soul shard spender. But the real power of Rapture is shown. You can see it when it comes to, like, council cleave fights. And it sort of feels that's maybe that's the direction they're trying to take Warlock and Shadowlands. I could be wrong here, but it could also be a nightmare, depending on tuning. Because if Demo is supposed to be our single target spec, yet Affliction is still our best single target spec with a jank Dark Glare and Deathbolt not working, it could be a mess. But I'm optimistic. I think we're certainly going to see more changes over these next few builds. I'm hoping for a big build next week. Obviously be streaming it. Shameless plug. But I'm hoping for some PvE changes, just changes to Warlocks in general, both PvE and PvP. You know, we have seen some more returning abilities over the last 2 or 3 builds. We did get Amplify Curse back, I think 3 weeks ago, and we got Curse of Exhaustion back. Amplify Curse applies Curse of Exhaustion, but we got that the week after we got Amplify back. So they are still making changes, obviously. Some classes probably are going to get changes before us, and we might be towards the end, but I would remain optimistic because I've been in alphas and betas for a while. Changes come for a long time. And when they do, everybody flocks to Warlocks or whatever class. But hey, let's be real here. We're typically the best DPS across the entire expansion when it comes to rating anyways, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Now, there are also a few generic things that I want to talk about that affect every Warlock spec pretty much across the board. Let's just tackle the biggest issue probably over the course of Alpha so far, pet summons. The change to 6-second pet summons is not a good thing. I don't really know. We haven't really gotten any clarification as to why Blizzard's gone back to 6-second pet summons from what they are now on live. If they're trying to get the nostalgia factor in there, that's not what we're looking for. That's not the kind of nostalgia we want. I don't think you can even really call that nostalgia. But either way, being real here, if it's an attempt to sort of make it more relevant if you kill a pet, because Hunter's got 6-second pet summons, I believe, too. If it's an attempt to make killing pets in PvP and arenas more relevant, then hey, that's awesome. Increase the cast time in arenas. Like, it feels really bad. It feels really bad. Like, it's not even that it feels bad, because I think that's sort of like a cop-out. Like, you have to support your argument and your reason as to why it feels bad and why you think this should be changed. There are so many times when it comes to PvE, I don't do a whole lot of PvP. When I do, I get angry. But for the most part, In PvE, there are plenty of times where I've had to swap between my Fell Hunter and my Imp on bosses. I do it on Il'gynoth every week to interrupt two organs, and then I'm back to my Imp. I mean, you can look at other fights where pets have been irrelevant for interrupts and purges for a long time now. Having that 6-second pet summon is extremely restrictive, and it's not like there's not really a reason as to why it's a thing. You know, it just in PvE all it is. Okay, well I lose 5 seconds of DPS to swap to a pet, but when it comes to, which is unfortunate, and even looking at Mythic Plus right now, Imp dispels, Voidwalker taunts, and Obelisk, purges, interrupts. Every single pet gets used in Mythic Plus right now in certain scenarios. Having a 6-second summon tied to that instead of a 2 or whatever it is now on live, and honestly I couldn't even tell you because it's modified with haste, but it's negatively impactful when it comes to even leveling. And I think Torias is a good example. That's been a pretty big focal point of most of Alpha the last month or so. We haven't really had many builds. There's a trait in there that gives us an instant cast pet summon. It's a gray trait. I don't know if it was written off or just not upped in value. It's our best trait. It's not even close. The argument ends there. It's our best trait. I summoned my Felguard probably over 200 times between floor 25 and 72. I think 72, 74. We've cleared it like 3 times on stream now. Over 200 times easily. And yes, you're not supposed to be going into 25 with no anima traits and low eye level, but regardless, when your pet dies, having a 6-second summon means you die with it. As long as you're not fighting a mob that you can kill quickly, or just it dies for some weird reason, trying to get your tank pet back out after it's died and casting a 6-second summon just feels terrible when you're getting beat on. You're just going to die half the time. In Torghast, I just died. Pet died, I died. That's it. Obviously 25, like I said, is a bit excessive, but it's big. If it's a PvP kind of thing, just make it relevant in arenas. Increase the cast time in battlegrounds and arenas, and okay, I guess that problem solved. But it's negatively impactful in PvE. I don't see any upside to it. I really don't. And I'm not like complaining. I'm not trying to make it seem like, oh, this is terrible, change this because this is gonna hurt the player base. I mean, it will, but I don't want it to seem like I'm whining about it. It's just there's no upside to this. It makes no sense, and we haven't even gotten any clarification on it, unfortunately. If there, and this also ties into the 3 specs we discussed. I've said a bunch. Warlocks probably aren't done. I don't think any class is done in Alpha. It's Alpha. It's not even Beta. If we're going to see a return, a Fell Domination, or I think there's some other like Flames of Zoroth, an ability that consumed the Soul Shard or is on like a 10-minute CD but gave us an instant cast pet summon, I think that goes a long way to helping alleviate the community's frustrations with a 6-second pet summon. Yes, it'll still be unfortunate if you have to summon a pet outside of that CD, if it's on a CD at all, outside of that ability, but it'll go a long way. And it will also capture the nostalgia essence of old WoW. Failed Domination was like, you have it in vanilla WoW, in classic WoW, you play it now. And the other one that consumed like a Burning Ember or whatever it was before, a Soul Shard to get a pet out instantly, it's relevant too. So that's my hunch. I could be way off here, but that's my hunch. That's what I think we're probably going to see at some point. Some kind of instant cast pet summon, or a large reduction to like the cast time of a pet whenever you use this ability. In the end, I mean, we're still going to have to deal with the 6-second summons unless they revert it sometime. I don't really know why that change was made. I like to sort of know. I'm sort of curious, but for the most part, I'm sort of holding my breath and holding out. So just mindlessly bashing something like that without giving any important feedback or reason as to why it should be changed or how it could be changed or altered, I think it's not where you want to be. It's irrelevant. So we did touch a bit on corruption and curses as well. Corruption at this point I feel is only going to be cast as Affliction, like normal. Having a cast time tied to corruption, it's 2 seconds too. It barring the damage being insanely overtuned, mostly probably makes it irrelevant when it comes to plus for Demo and Destro. And let's be real here, even if the damage was pretty high, I don't want to be applying a dot 4 times in general, even if it's instant cast. I don't want to be casting corruption for 7 seconds on a 4-pack pull, when a Demon Hunter is blasting it now with I-beams and other classes are just swinging away. I'm putting up dots, The nostalgia factor is there. It's cool having baseline corruption across every spec, I suppose, but I don't totally know what they want us to do with it because it's not going to be used right now. And even if it is used, it sort of feels like we're being forced to use it if it's good enough to be used. You know what I'm saying? Like, when it comes to council fights or cleave fights in a raid with 2 or 3 permanent targets, I could see probably maintaining it as Destro or Demo, I guess, you know. But it doesn't even really fit Demo's toolkit, being a single target, mostly like glass, or I guess cannon, mostly glass cannon, but I mean, you know. So I'm not really sure what their plans are with corruption right now. If it, like I said, if it's just some kind of ability they wanted to bring back for the nostalgia, this is cool for leveling and you never cast it again, well, okay, that's probably where it's at right now, for Destro and Demo. But we'll see, you know. Curses are in a semi-similar spot too. The first curse we apply in the raid as a Warlock is going to be Recklessness to the boss. A 5% melee damage amp is too important, too impactful to miss out on. The second Warlock will probably end up applying Curse of Weakness, which both work on bosses currently. I don't know if this is intended or not, and I'm going to be real, tuning around Curse of Weakness, like, because some raids will have multiple locks and some won't, and some won't have any. Like, tuning bosses around Curse of Weakness, both in and out of multiple Warlock scenarios, it's going to be an absolute nightmare. I sort of hope they just say Weakness doesn't work on bosses. And the same, I mean, it'd be Recklessness. I don't know. But it seems really, really odd that Weakness would work on bosses right now. But first Warlock's going to put up Wreck. Second one's going to put up Weakness. If it's not needed, then you'll put up Doom. But Doom's damage is unfortunately not really very strong right now. It doesn't feel like Curse of Doom used to, where it chunked that target. It deals a bit of damage, but it's not where it used to be, you know. And the Doom Guard part, I don't know, it's not even working currently, and it's sort of a nightmare if it ends up getting summoned. But I mean, let's be real here, it is sort of nostalgic, it is what it is, but I don't think we're ever going to see a Doom Guard summoned, just with the way it currently functions. You have a better chance of winning the lottery, truly, than summoning a Doom Guard in a 25-man raid setting with Doom. So that's okay, you know, the nostalgia factor is there. If they end up buffing the damage on it, okay, that, I guess, it brings back more of a Doom kind of feeling, but then you're sort of fighting over, well, who's putting up Recklessness and who gets to put up Curse of Doom, similar to how Elements used to be a long time ago. So as much as I can sort of get behind the utility matters, raid utility matters thing, and they're trying to give more classes more raid utility, I think there's a line when it comes to like these curses that they might want to like look at reevaluating, because like I said, having one lock put up a generic curse that amplifies melee's damage but not theirs, and the other lock putting up Doom, you know, not always the best look. But at the same time, at this current point in time, you have like 11 or 12 actual classes that are required for like the optimal raid buff comp, I think, right now, with like DK's getting AMZ, Paladins getting Autumn, Warlocks getting Curses, other classes getting returning abilities, Paladins also getting Devo Aura. It's getting up there. And yes, Curses, they were around before, but that was also a 25-man setting or a 40-man setting with no monks, no demon hunters, and no death knights. So raid spots are getting pretty competitive. It might be a good time to be a Warlock if Recklessness and Weakness work. And if they don't work on bosses anymore, well, then it might be a bad time to be a Warlock. But let's be true. Let's be real here. Warlocks are typically pretty OP every tier. So for the most part, I think Warlocks are in a good spot on Alpha right now. I'm the minority there, but I'm just being real with you. This is Alpha. I've been through many Alphas, many Betas before. I was in BFA Alpha before items had names just like this one. And guess what? When it comes to rating its entire expansion, this is not even just my opinion. This is factual numerical data backs us up. We were the best class over every single tier total combined this entire expansion. We looked at it on stream. Warlocks, you know, we typically always end up faring well. It ends up coming down to numerical tuning. In Mythic Plus, and BFA is a different story. I think we're in a good spot, though. I think it's important to keep in mind it's Alpha. Tuning will come. Class changes will probably end up coming. We'll probably end up seeing changes to Dark Lair, the way AF CDs work. Maybe some Destro changes. Maybe some Demo changes. We'll see. But I think for the most part, we're still in a pretty good spot so far in Shadowlands Alpha. Thanks for watching, dudes. I know this video was a bit longer and a little different than what I normally do presentation-wise, but with there being not a whole lot of content, Warlock content, in the last few weeks on Alpha, I sort of wanted to give you like a 2-week, I guess like month-ish long summary of how locks are on Alpha, what can maybe be improved upon, how we feel in a lot of different situations, and just what I think is going to end up happening later on. Any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. I'll be sure to get back to you. And also, let me know what you guys think of how Demo, Destro, and AF are feeling right now, as well as your thoughts on the 6-second pet changes down below. I'm really curious to know what you guys think about it. Once again, all my week auras, profiles, add-ons are available to you for free on my Twitch. I stream 5 to 6 days a week. Feel free to swing by, grab them, drop a follow, and hang out on stream if you want anytime. Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to support the channel more, feel free to smash these subscribe, share, and or like buttons. And I will see you all again soon. Peace!